a podcast called Strangest Fruit.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good night. I don't know what time it is or what part of the world you're at, but welcome back to the Strangest Fruit Podcast. And we have a very special guest today, and it is Miss Cerise Castle. There we go.
You got it.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm blessed. I'm all right. You know,
I'm doing good.
This is amazing right here because you the voice.
Thank you.
You got a special job that you have to do in this world. Yeah. And I tell people often that superheroes don't wear capes.
No. I wear jeans.
Wear jeans. So how old are you?
I'm going to be 31 in April of 2024, which is when we're recording this.
Feel so old. I'm good 33.
Oh, yeah. You're so old.
Native California?
Yeah. Born and raised.
Born and raised. How did you like that?
I love it. I've lived in Massachusetts. I've lived in New York. I lived in Amsterdam for a little bit, but I always come back to LA.
So LA is your favorite?
LA is my favorite.
Tell us how was life for you growing up?
Not great. Honestly, I had a pretty rough childhood. I didn't really grow up at home. I had different foster families that I lived with mostly on and off. I left home for good when I was 16, 17. And yeah, I mean, it was tough. It's a tough way for a kid to grow up.
What's the geographics of paint a picture of where we're at so we can...
Yeah. So I moved around a lot. I probably spent the most amount of time consistently in Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach. That's where I went to school. I went to a lot of private schools down there, mostly Christian schools. My mom was very big on education.
Christian school? Private school?
Yeah. And then I went to public school in Huntington Beach. I went to a high school called Ocean View High School.
How did that change? Was it a big difference?
From private to public, the private schools were a lot smaller. The kids, though, I don't know. I feel like we got up to more madness in private school than we did in public school.
Really?
Straight up. Yeah. I probably started drinking when I was 12, 13.
In private school?
In private school. There were these parents that would just let the kids have these ragers, and the parents would be right there with us, drinking. It was pretty... I don't know if I can cuss on here.
But no, I don't give a damn.
Oh, it was pretty fucked up. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The cheerleader. I did a lot of AP and IB classes, living a double life.
I'm getting a lot of vibes of a mix of different cultures here.
Yeah. My dad he's a white guy. He's actually from the city of Compton.
The way you said it.
Well, a lot of people... don't really know that Compton used to be a very white city for a long time.
Named after a white man.
Farmland. Yes. Yeah. My dad, he grew up there in the 1950s. He lived there until probably the early 70s. He had horses in his backyard. They still have people with horses in Compton. Yeah.
My young man over here, my guy, Young Spill, he seen the horses just riding through the street and he was like,
holy shit, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's what we do. We ride horses in the street in Compton, baby. And I was like, that's just regular, bro.
Yeah, it's regular. Yeah. And my mom, she's Black. She's from the Bronx. Yeah. So two people from two great cities.
Yeah. How did that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed like a nice little mix. I can see how that adds up now. All right. I can see how that goes together. And so, did you have a good relationship with them later on in the years as you got older or no?
No, not really. My dad unfortunately passed away when I was 8, but we had a very close relationship until that point. I still miss him a lot. My mom, we haven't spoken since I was probably 18. We never really had a good relationship or anything. So we're not in touch, but I am really close with my grandmother, which is her mom.
Still got somebody.
Yeah, I do.
So high school,
Mm-hmm.
you're running wild.
Running wild.
Running wild.
In a very like manicured way. Yeah.
What happens where you have that change and you're like, all right, this is where my life is leading? What was the causative factors?
That's a great question. So honestly, like just like growing up the way I did, not really having consistent like home life, consistent, like not really having a good relationship with my mom. There was a lot of abuse in the home. All that to say, like I didn't really love myself. I didn't really think that my life had any like meaning or purpose. And a lot of my friends when I was in high school died. They were murdered, very like violent, just like street violence. And I didn't really think that I was long for this world. I was just kind of like resigned to the fact that I would probably like die before I was 21.
So you were living in just constant fear.
Not so much fear. I just like didn't care. I didn't really care about like my life or like what I was going to do. I didn't think I had anything to contribute. And I was just kind of like ready to like burn out quickly, I guess. I thought I was going to end up like a lot of my friends. Yeah. Yeah. I thought I would probably get like killed or probably get killed or something before I was 21.
And then something happened.
And then something happened. Yeah. I mean, it is a sweet story. I haven't talked to this person like since this happened, but I don't know, maybe she'll see this. I had an English teacher at my high school, and she was actually friends with I lived with a friend my last year of high school after I left home. And the mom of the house was friends with this English teacher. They went to AA together. And they were talking about me, and both of them weren't really happy with the fact that I didn't have plans for college or anything, that I was just kind of like, I'm just going to, work this retail job that I have and do whatever. And they came up with a scheme. So when I went to school, I think this was probably like October of my senior year.
Good scheme or bad scheme?
It was it kind of pissed me off, but in the long term, it was a good scheme. They were like, the teacher told me, she sat me down and was like, look, I've been talking to my friend about you, and we decided that if you don't apply to at least 5 colleges, I'm going to fail you from this class and you won't be able to graduate. You'll have to repeat your senior year. They both knew that I really wanted to get my high school degree, and I didn't want to be a 5th year senior. So I was kind of upset because I was like, it's my choice if I don't want to go to college. Like, who are you to tell me that I need to go? And I was, kind of upset about it for a little while, but I did get the applications in and I was accepted to some schools.
Which ones?
The first one that I was accepted to was Emerson College. I did get rejected from USC, which is where I really wanted to go. But I actually was asked to be a fellow with them last year. So I've technically now gone to USC. I've also taught at USC. So
you taught
funny
there?
how, yeah. So it's funny
You're
how
a professor?
Little bit.
A little bit. Who says that? A little bit. All right.
Yeah. So Emerson was the first one that accepted me. And when I got accepted, I told the mom of the house, and I hadn't spoken to my grandmother at that point in like 10 years. And she found my grandmother and told her, she's been accepted to college. Like right now, she didn't have a way to pay for me to go, but she was like, I really think it would be good for her to go and like, get out of California and just see the world and see what life has to offer. And my grandmother was like, yeah, absolutely. And she paid for my first semester of college and I went.
And what did you major in?
Journalism.
Who are some of your go-to people that you look up to that inspires you with journalism?
Ooh, okay. Great question. I've always been interested in journalism, probably dating back to when I was a little kid. My dad always used to watch this program called The News Hour on PBS, and I really liked it. There was this...
You watched it?
I've always been a nerd. That's the other thing. Like, I grew up listening to like NPR, watching like the news,
One Piece report.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's always been interesting to me. So Jim Lehrer, he was the anchor when I was a kid. Gwen Ifill, she's one of my favorite journalists of all time. Katie Couric. I love Katie Couric. Lisa Ling, another one that I love. Ann Curry, she's actually the person that she told me to be a journalist when I was in 8th grade. So it's really thanks to her that I'm sitting.
What about Robin Roberts?
Robin Roberts actually spoke at my college graduation, and I got out of line to getting my diploma to go up to her and to tell her thank you.
Did you make it to her?
I did. And she gave me a hug and everything. It was really nice.
Robin is nice.
Yeah.
So you leave college.
Mm-hmm.
How did you prepare to leave college?
Oh, I didn't really prepare. I didn't think I was going to go until I was probably like in Boston. I didn't think it was like actually going to happen. I didn't take it seriously really at all. That whole summer, I remember I was just like really zoned out, just like smoking, drinking, not really taking it seriously. I didn't think it was real. I was like, there's no way that like someone is going to pay like $25,000 for me to go to this school. There's no way. But it happened. So I got there and I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. Like we're here.
What is your particular angle in journalism? What is your niche? What is this thing that you do that makes it magic for you?
I really like getting to know people and sharing their stories. One thing with the stories that I do, and this goes back, like I was part of my high school newspaper. I was doing reporting in college. All the stories that I do tend to, I think, focus on communities or people that aren't typically given the space in, newspapers, television broadcasts to really speak about their stories and share their realities. When I was growing up reading the newspaper about, neighborhoods that I lived in, about people that I share a lot of commonalities with, the coverage was always very slanted. Like when you read about growing up, when I was reading about things happening in like West Adams, for example, where I lived for a little bit, it was always like, there's so much crime. There's, people are killing each other, da 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 da. And that wasn't really like most of what I saw. Like what I experienced was like, loving neighbors, beautiful community, people helping each other out. Like life wasn't just, doom and gloom all the time.
So you just said, you guys are at this extreme. Let me go to this extreme.
Yeah. Well, not extreme, but just kind of just like telling the full story. Like even when you're telling a story about, like one thing that we see in the news a lot, like lately is like retail theft, right? Organized retail crime, smash and grab. And the stories are all just kind of like, oh, like this is so terrible. All these like young people are just out here stealing. There's a lot missing from that. Like if I were going to do that story, like you have to ask yourself the question, what drives somebody to that point to do that? What are they missing in their life where they feel like they need to like, go take 7 pairs of jeans? Like, why are they not able to, why is that the method that they're making money, right? Why is the need so great that it needs to be there? What's going on in their life? What is their trauma that has driven them to that point? I think that's a much more responsible way to tell a story. And then also in doing that, you have to look at like, well, we're talking about retail theft. What about these companies stealing from the workers? Time theft, wage theft. I'm sure that plays a role at some point in the equation that leads people to, do a smash and grab.
So how do you ascertain the confidence enough to take on a group of individuals that have the power to kill, the right to kill?
I honestly just like stopped giving a fuck at a certain point. In 2020, I just went through a lot. I mean, we all went through a lot in 2020. It was a really traumatic year for everyone. For me specifically, I just kind of felt like I was at the end of my rope professionally. I was working at a local radio station here in LA, and I had been there for about a year, and I had a horrible time. It was just a lot of like racism that I was dealing with, a lot of homophobia, a lot of transphobia, and just dealing with that every day. Like it does take an effect on like your health, on your mental health. So I was already in a bad place. The pandemic happened. We were on lockdown. I was never really locked down because as a reporter, we were allowed to like go around and move, like still do our job because people needed to get the news. But I mean, just, I don't know, seeing all of that, I had 10 people in my family die from COVID in 2020. That was really intense. George Floyd was murdered. We saw so many murders that summer in a very like public way. And for me at work, watching all this happen and just feeling like the coverage wasn't being done the way it needed to, it was driving me crazy. And so to answer your question, like, what does it take you? How do you get to that point? I just like didn't care anymore. I was like, there's so much like bad shit happening. Like it doesn't make sense for me to like hold back, or to that like sense of like self-preservation was just like gone. It was like, if I do this thing and like if it brings harm to me, like I don't care anymore at this point, because there's so much bigger stuff to come from me doing that.
With that being said, who are the Linwood Vikings?
The Linwood Vikings are the first deputy gang that I ever heard of. They were really big in the 90s when I was growing up. They were a white supremacist neo-Nazi gang that was founded at the Linwood Sheriff's Station. It was mostly white members, mostly men, but they did have a couple of women. I know that they had at least one black deputy sheriff that was a tattooed Viking.
Oh, that is a contradiction to what a black man is supposed to be. Wow. That takes some serious dedication to a cloth. So, I mean, but they do identify their own identity. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
How did you come about the knowledge of the Linwood Vikings?
I heard about the Linwood Vikings when I was a kid. So in 1995, I think, I might be wrong on this, but it was around there was a class action lawsuit filed by the people of Linwood. And that's actually a really beautiful story. And to me, speaks to a lot of the themes that I try to get in my reporting. That class action lawsuit came together because of two like local gangs that were, from what I understand, they did have beef with each other, but that beef was also really stirred up by the sheriff's department instigating and doing things to make it seem that like there was a lot more bad blood than there really was, from what I've been able to ascertain, 30 years later. And, the gang saw that, this was the sheriffs that were doing it, and it was the Linwood Vikings that were doing it. And they came together and they made a truce, and they said, okay, now that we have this truce in place, let's go after them in a court of law and put an end to this. And they filed this class action lawsuit with, over 100 people telling their stories about the torture that they were subjected to at the hands of the Vikings. And it made a splash in the papers at the time. And a lot of people were talking about it. And I'm guessing that's how I ended up hearing about it as a small child in school. We would have, DARE program, PAL program. The deputies come in and talk to us.
DARE, to resist drugs and violence.
Yes. They would talk to us and be like, look, like, don't join a gang. Don't be in a gang. It's bad. Like, you'll go to jail. And at the same time, I'm hearing, teachers, I'm hearing parents, I'm hearing other kids be like, well, watch out for deputies that are white and bald because they're probably Vikings. And this is what they do. They like come after us. And it just didn't make sense to me that I could have, sheriff's deputies sitting in front of me telling me like, stay out of gang. All gang members are bad. But he's in a gang and, he's unfairly targeting like people that look like me just because we're black.
So
like,
what age were you at this time, and how did you process that? Like how do you process that? Like
I must have been probably like 6 when this was happening. Like first grade is like when I clearly remember like thinking like this just like doesn't make sense. Like you process it like in a child's way, like, oh, that just like kind of doesn't make sense. But it lived in me. Like it was a question that I always had. And I can remember like going to the library and like looking at the paper and being like, oh, like Linwood Viking, like, okay. And looking to try to find more. Like, I remember always looking for, like, is there a book on this, on deputy gangs? Like, I just want to know more. I don't really understand. It just didn't compute. Like, because I would, see these deputies like targeting people in my community. I've had friends that have been like taken to jail. Like when we were kids.
Right.
When we were kids, I had like, like young men that I was cool with, like just being like snatched up and like taken away to like Nydorf just for like being friends with, somebody. And like all of a sudden they're a gang member just because you grew up on this block. Like, oh, all of a sudden you're a criminal. Like it just didn't compute.
That is so interesting because we interviewed a cop here, a former cop. And I asked him with a law or a penal code like 186.22b, Criminal Street Terror Street Gang Act, is that considered a secret weapon throughout any type of police? Because you put that on, that's automatic 10 years.
They started doing that, but they also started doing the conspiracy stuff in the 90s.
That was with the Operation Safe Streets.
Yeah, they started
doing
the conspiracies. They started catching conspiracy. They'll fabricate
the injunctions and all that.
The injunctions. So they started.
That was a secret weapon?
That was a secret weapon. Echo Park, all these neighborhoods, they'll get hit with this new the conspiracy stuff. So they could book like 10 of them guys on one rifle, one dope called plot to shoot somebody.
He admitted to it. He said that's one of our biggest tools because we know with that alone we can put you away for 10 years.
Yeah,
and it's never going to come off of you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and then that carries on when you go into state penitentiary. You have to register with the FBI as a terrorist. So all of it just adds up, and it's just the money schemes.
Yeah.
So we're the 3,000 boys.
I feel like they're probably like one of the most dangerous, I think, because they are in the jails. It's a deputy gang that's in the jails. And they work on the 3,000 block at Men's Central Jail. And I say they're the most dangerous because when you're a sheriff's deputy, the first assignment that you get after you graduate the academy is working in the jails. And when you're going from the academy into the jails, into this environment where, one, it's a deputy gang, two, just like the number, like the amount of violence that happens in the jails, like it's unmatched. Like I personally, I haven't been to MCJ. I've talked to a lot of people that are still there, people that have been in and out, and it sounds like hell. Like
you have no bearing of time, day, night. You don't know when the time changes. It's never quiet. The smell is horrible. The mental health dudes, that's just a whole nother story. Like, you got naked dudes laying around on the floors on top of each other's and safety smocks. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And
I've heard there's no like running water.
No, it'll be flooded, rats running everywhere, and you just sit in there all day.
Yeah.
So then you have the cops. If you refuse to go somewhere, they're waiting after court. They're waiting with batons, knee pads on, helmets, shoulder pads, and there's like 15 of them. And they're like waiting for you to refuse. And you have about 10, 15 dudes. As a kid, if you talked on the bus, when you got to Men's Central Jail, we were being tried as adults. So we had to ride with the sheriffs.
Yeah.
If you talked on the bus, they would kick you off the front step off the bus and pick you up, take your socks off, and make you walk through the transportation depot with no socks on.
Oh my God.
So we're going through that as kids.
Yeah.
So we're being hogtied, all this type of stuff. I mean,
yeah.
Come on now. Like, we know about the headhunters. I'm pretty sure you know who Blondie is. Yes. Can you explain to people who Blondie is?
Well, from what I understand, she was like kind of this like notorious like female cop.
Blondie was one of the males.
Oh, one of the male. Okay, I know a different Blondie.
He worked out of sheriffs. He was in the sheriffs and the cop and police. He was the original hop out boy.
Okay.
And that's what made that. They brought that to the map.
Yeah.
And that's when, they wanted to get the police out of there. So what was the case that was the breaking point where you were like, I'm all in, when you said your big case, the one that went to all the media and everybody was like, whoa, who is this and what is she talking about?
So the story that I did was in 2021, I just sat down for, I think, like 6 months. Let me count. Yeah, So like 6 months, I just like sat down and did a bunch of research on deputy gangs. And I wrote a 15-part series that told everything that I had been able to find out. I was able to trace the origins of deputy gangs back to the 1970s. And I identified 18 different deputy gangs within the sheriff's department. And
identified like 10 of them for us and their geographics, where they're at.
Yeah. Well, from what I've been told, like, since, is that there are deputy gangs in every station. At that point, I had 18 throughout the county. I mean, pretty much at every station. The ones that were missing were probably like Industry, Marina Del Rey, Malibu. But for the most part, a presence in every station.
Still active?
Still active. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about deputy gangs. Like, usually they'll be formed at one station, like the Linwood Vikings, for example. That's actually a great example because it hits on a lot of things. So the Linwood Vikings were started at the Linwood station, and they closed the Linwood station. Kind of as a result of that lawsuit. It wasn't part of the settlement, but the lawsuit that I was speaking about earlier did contribute heavily to that station being closed. When that station closed, all of those Vikings needed to be reassigned somewhere else. So a lot of them went to the Century station, and they brought that deputy gang culture with them. And a couple of years after they were there, a new deputy gang was formed, a gang called the Regulators, that you're probably familiar with. And people get promoted. So maybe they'll go to another unit.
So
but
I'm
they're
not the only
taking
one
it
who
with
has
them.
noticed that. Why is it that cops or officers who get reprimanded always seem to get promoted immediately after for doing some foul shit?
Yeah.
For lack of better words. Is that a thing? Is there some type of correlation with that?
I think so. I haven't been able to find anything on paper yet, but yeah, I mean, it seems like there absolutely is a correlation with, a deputy killing someone and then, 6 months later getting, a Medal of Honor and a promotion. I just did a story in January about this was like some deputy on deputy gang violence. Basically, this deputy gang drove out to the desert, and they had this like overnight camping trip planned. And during the course of the night, what I've been told from people familiar with the situation is that one of the gang members had made a unauthorized change to his deputy gang tattoo. So they held him down in the sand, and they fired a gun several times into the floor and tried to burn the tattoo off of his leg. And when that didn't work, they just shot him point blank in the ankle and shot the tattoo off of him.
Wow. Or did they go to jail? Or
no. So the shooter was actually promoted a couple of months after this all happened. He became a sergeant and is now responsible for overseeing deputies at his station.
Were you the great person who was involved with unmasking the whole LA County Jail Lee Baca incident with the raid that went on there?
I wish. I've spoken to the guy that was behind that, Anthony Brown, who I think is just like a living legend. He was incarcerated for bank robbery, I believe. And he was approached by the FBI when he was incarcerated at MCJ to be basically like a spy for the FBI to get the deputies caught up for bringing in contraband, bringing in cell phones, beating people up, that kind of thing. And in the course, the FBI gave him a cell phone, and he was using that to, log everything that was happening and report back to his handlers what he was seeing. And the sheriff's department found out about that. And basically what happened is a scheme was hatched by Paul Tanaka, who was second in command, and Lee Baca to hide Anthony Brown from the FBI. And they would move him around from cell to cell every couple of hours, every couple of days, and they would make up names for him and put him in the system under fake names. So nobody knew who he was or where he was. The FBI couldn't find him. His family couldn't find him. They had no idea. He was disappeared inside the jail. Yeah. Eventually, though, and this story, it gets even crazier. So his handler starts looking for him. She's calling her bosses, and the sheriff's department actually showed up to her house. And there's a video of this. They walked up to her when she's trying to get into her car to go to work, and they basically told her, leave this alone, stop messing with this, let it go. And that's an FBI agent.
Right.
Like, they really are really bold with it. But they did eventually find him, and it led to federal charges against Lee Baca and Paul Tanaka. They both went to federal prison. They were released in 2020. I've spoken to Lee Baca since then.
And how did that go?
Honestly, it was probably one of the strangest conversations that I've had. He said he was familiar with my reporting. He said that I was a very talented journalist and that he respected my work. He also said that he had no regrets and that he didn't feel that he did anything wrong.
Very diplomatic, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Knows how to answer the questions real well. I would say with over 60 years of answering questions, he can wiggle his way out of something. Did you ask him about the dementia? Because that was a real mob move there. Getting ready to go to court. Uh-oh. My health slipping. Oh my gosh.
A lot of people have different opinions about that. Some people are like, yeah, he has it. Other people are like, no. And from the conversation that I have and like from conversations that I've had with seniors that have like elements of dementia, it's easy to remember things that happened in the past. That's easier to recall, but the things that are happening right now are a little bit more tricky. So, I mean, in the conversation that we had, he was really quick with it, remembering stuff in like the 90s. I would ask him about, something that happened when he was captain of, the station. I think he was captain of Lennox Station. And he was like, oh yeah, like going through it very easily. So, I mean, I'm not saying that like he doesn't have it, like he could, but for the stuff I wanted to know about, he could recall that very easily.
And what were some of the things that he could recall?
We talked about when he was captain of Lennox, the station had the most shootings out of the entire department. And it was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was significant. It was more than double like the next station for the amount of times the deputies were firing their guns. And I was like, well, how does that happen? Is there a correlation to a deputy gang there? What was the reason? And his answer was, kind of what you'll hear a lot from this type of person is like, oh, it's a violent area, so you gotta fire more guns, which I personally don't agree with, but that was his take.
So with dealing with all this, it's a lot. Do you feel safe day to day moving around?
For the most part, yeah. There are sometimes incidents that happen that kind of make me question things from time to time. But for the most part, I would say yes. The last like sketchy incident that I was in Compton and I was reporting and admittedly,
had to be Compton.
Admittedly, I said that night, I want to see Executioners, which is a deputy gang in the Compton station. And I told the people I was with, like, we're going to find some Executioners tonight. I want to see them in action. So we were driving around. I was with a woman that does cop watching in Compton. And
it's a thing called cop watching?
Yes. First Amendment auditors. What they do is they will listen to the police scanner. And when they hear where they are, or if something's happening, they will drive to where it is and film what's happening to make sure that the cops are doing everything correctly. And so what we were doing is we were literally just driving around looking for them. If we saw one drive by, we would follow them. If we saw someone getting pulled over, we would pull over. We would film everything. When the interaction was over, we would talk to the person that was pulled over and say, hey, like, do you think they were fair with you? Yes, no. Like, what do you think they could have done better? What do you think they could have done worse? Would you like a copy of this video in case you want to make a complaint, take any kind of action? And people do that. Mostly, I would say mostly in South LA County is where I run into it the most.
Explain what I'm from Compton. So what is a executioner?
An executioner is, well, what we've learned since then is that they don't call themselves that. That was a name that I think was created by attorneys, but it's a deputy gang. Yeah, that's who they say controls the Compton station, is that deputy gang.
And what is the history of it? Are they a violent crew? Because I've heard of the certain deputy gangs out of the 77th Division, particularly where they say in order to join their gang, you have to get your first blood, and that's you have to get an active shooter call and kill a black.
Yeah.
So are they the same way?
I've heard that. I've heard that you can only get the ink if you've been involved in a shooting and someone died, that you killed someone. They were founded in 2002 by a former 3000 boy. There's a pipeline actually from Men's Central Jail, those deputies, to work in Compton and to work in the stations in South Los Angeles. So, I mean, there's some of like the most violent for the reasons we were talking about earlier, just, you know, the sheer amount of violence that goes on in the jails. That's how they're trained. And then they come out to the streets and they're bringing those same tactics, and they're very eager to, you know, beat people up. They're very eager to shoot people and ask questions later. Yeah, I would say they're extremely violent, just like based on what I've seen, you know, in the past couple of months, like going out in Compton at night, like watching them. When I was reporting in Compton, I did a study. This was my USC reporting, just asking people, like, I wanted to know how these interactions with deputies were affecting people's physical and mental health. And in talking to people, one thing that really stuck with me is people would be like, I just don't leave my house at night. And it's not because I'm afraid of, you know, the street gangs. It's because I'm afraid of the sheriff's deputies. They're the ones that are going to, you know, catch me up, put me in jail, or even worse, kill me. I think it was 50. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but it was at least a third of the people that I interviewed for this study told me that they knew someone that had been killed by sheriff's deputies in Compton.
Has anybody in here been to Compton recently, been pulled over?
Me.
You have?
Yeah.
So we would like to ask the question. I know Mercedes has experienced it, and she didn't like that at all. It was different. And when we left from being pulled over, I said, I've never seen a cop talk like that. Like it was, because I seen him and the way that he pulled up, I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be some bull.
Yeah.
And I just explained to her, like, you know, throw your hands out of the car. And when he approached, it wasn't like, excuse me, how you doing, license and registration? Like, what's up, G? Where you from? You got any, you know, guns or dope on you? And she tried to get the insurance information. He's like, I don't care about that. Him.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know where you at? Like, when you see my tattoos, what you doing over here? He went and checked and let me go. But it was just the experience, like, no, this is how they roll. You know,
Yeah.
they have that mind state of it takes one to know one. And if you want to beat a dog, you got to be it. And they're I don't know how to combat that. How can you combat somebody who is the law?
I don't know. I mean, it's difficult. I don't know if there is a way to like fix it, honestly.
How many officers have been convicted of the things that have happened?
Of deputy gang activity? 0.
So
because it's not a crime while it would be a crime for you or I to be in a gang, and if I, you know, I mean, technically by the standards of Cal Gang, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, like I could be in Cal Gang right now as like an affiliate of a number of different gangs, just by the virtue of people that I know that are in there because of where they grew up or who they're friends with. And so if I don't like, let's say I like stole something from like Bloomingdale's, let's say I like stole this pair of jeans, automatically I get 10 extra years for being a gang member. Right. If a cop did the same thing, like they don't get any gang enhancement for being a member of the executioners.
And that has been my biggest argument over the years, because let's go down to the penal code. I love this shit. I love this part right here. I've been waiting for you to come because I need somebody to get in here and get with it with me. So penal code 186.22b, criminal street terror, street gang act, 10-year enhancement, life term enhancement, all that. Add the gun enhancement of the early 2000s Operation Safe Street. Shall we go over it again? Each bullet with a hollow tip will get you an extra 10 years till the clip is empty. So it's football numbers. So you have street gang. What makes it? A person, three or more,
3 or more.
wearing the same color, saying what this is for.
Mm-hmm. Common name, hand sign, or symbol.
Sheriffs, same color, 3 or more, coming with the same thing and with the same. How is there no equality and justice?
Yeah, it's a huge double standard.
And this should be held to a higher standard because you took an oath to do this. Like me,
Right. You're a private citizen.
But what I did was for a gang. I
Yeah.
didn't take an oath to go above and beyond and be
Right.
this person of the law.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do we combat that? Because it's because whether they want to admit it or not, there's a lot of people in the community that feel safe because there's a gang member that's outside rather than that cop rolling down the street.
Right. And that's what I heard a lot from people. It's like, I feel safer with my neighbors that I know who, okay, like they might be in a gang, but, you know, I've known him since he was a kid.
Right.
He cut my lawn. Like, he watches my kids. Like, when things go wrong in the neighborhood, that's who I'm calling. I'm not calling the cops.
Right.
Yeah.
And then cops show up after a crime is committed,
Right.
not to prevent it.
Not at all.
So should you, let's say, think there would be a private company come out
No.
and be liaisons in the community, by the community, for the community?
I'm really opposed to privatized policing because it's even harder to report on than public entities. California law very recently made it so that we can get records on deputy. Anytime a deputy fires a gun, we're entitled to those records, or entitled to the records if they lie about anything, if they commit a sexual assault, if there is a use of excessive force to the point where someone is hurt. We're entitled to those records. And that took years of work and organizing to get that. Those laws only came online in 2019.
So that wasn't applied with the Federal Viewing Rights Act?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. No?
No. California is probably, like, until very recently, it was one of the hardest places to report on police.
That's tricky. How?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, unfortunately. And it was this legislation that passed in 2019 that made it so we could get those records, SB 1421, and then subsequently SB 16. And I say all that to say, like, that took a long time. Private companies, you're not entitled to that because it's a private company. When it's a public entity, they're subject to public records requests, but private companies are not. So if we were to bring in a private company to do, you know, policing and something went wrong, it'd be really difficult for someone like me to investigate that because it's a private company.
Right.
They don't have to give me any information.
Let's date back a little bit. George Floyd gets murdered by a cop on camera. The entire United States and world goes crazy over it. There was a section in Beverly Hills, Melrose area, all that going around there, where cops from Texas, Memphis, flying in from New York, flew in to assist the LAPD in safeguarding those areas, and basically said, you leave the chaos over there, you guys can do this, but this, we have this, and if you cross this line, we will kill you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just underscores, like, what the point of police really are, which is to protect, like, property and capital. They're not really interested in our well-being or the well-being of the community. It's to protect assets. They're not really out here to, you know, do anything for us. I just did a story, actually, about where the sheriff's deputies live, and I found that about 40% of them don't even live in LA County.
Santa Clarita.
Yeah.
Copland. I call it Copland. Santa Clarita, everywhere.
A lot of them live in San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County. And what really surprised me is that there are more than 50 of them that don't even live in the state of California. They live in Tennessee. They live in Kentucky. They live in Idaho. These are places that are, you know, a plane ride, several hour plane ride away from here.
How does that work? So they fly home and then fly back to do a shift.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody in their right mind finna be doing that. That's what?
Yeah. They have this thing called a flex schedule where you can work doubles for 3 days and then have 4 days off. And that's what they'll do. They'll get the flex schedule. So they come to LA, they work for 3 days, and then they'll fly back to, Kentucky and have their 4 days with their family.
Yeah, you just bringing so much stuff to light. That doesn't make any sense. How much, and is the department paying for this?
Well, I mean, they get very generous salaries. The average salary of a sheriff's deputy is $164,000. And that's, you just go make that. You don't need a college diploma or anything. You can just go make that. So they have money to do this. And they get benefits. They get pensions that we pay for the rest of their lives. It's easy. Like, they can certainly afford it. Yes.
Yeah, there's possibly. So I'll say it like they say with the gangs. The gangs will never leave. I'm talking about street gangs. I say gangs will never leave. But what can we do to try to change the narrative, change the cause? Do you believe that if there's going to be any more sheriffs, LAPD, whatever the case may be, should it be people that are growing up in these neighborhoods? I would say the only way that I can trust a sheriff deputy is if I see your son and my son outside playing together. I want to see you outside with them. That's the only way.
Yeah. I mean, like, personally speaking, I think like this department is like kind of beyond fixing.
Right.
A lot of people were really excited when Alex Villanueva, our former sheriff, who was a very vocal.
The guy that has the podcast now?
Does he have a podcast?
Yeah, he got his own show. She said,
he had an AM radio show for a while that he like had a whole hour-long episode on me, which was really weird, frankly.
A whole hour episode just talking about you?
Just like shit talking. Yeah.
A local person who definitely has an axe to grind against the sheriff's department, but she does not admit it in her studies, and that's one Cerise Castle from Knock LA, one of these activists or hacktivists, I don't know what they call themselves these days, groups.
Oh, he got time.
Yeah.
He retired, right?
Well, now he's running for County Board of Supervisors. So make sure you vote.
I think we should get a Hello Kitty gang. What do you think about that? I think we could do that.
So it's broken beyond repair.
In my opinion, yeah. Yeah, as I was saying, people were really excited that he got out and we got a new guy in. But my first story about our new sheriff, Robert Luna, is that he hired someone that willingly admitted to having a deputy gang tattoo to be his number 2. And she's still his number 2. I interviewed her. Her name is April Tardy. We spoke at length about her tattoo.
And she just spilled the beans.
Yeah.
And she's still an active member.
She is the second in command of the sheriff's department at this moment.
No, I'm talking about, is she an active member of the gang still? I mean, she still has a tattoo.
She still has the tattoo. I mean, I think if I were to ask her that, she would say it was never a gang.
Like a fraternity. That's what we're going with.
Yes. I spoke to someone familiar with the operations of that. I mean, I would call it a gang. And their opinion was that it was a networking group, which I thought was really an interesting.
That's a way to change the narrative, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
Would you say that your group is a networking group?
An elite social class.
Yeah.
So if you want to change it, an elite social, we have picnics and pass out cookies.
Yeah.
I mean, but I would say I see more change with the guys that are actually in the streets because they live it and they see it and they want it, and nobody wants to see their kids go through that. To whereas you look at sheriffs, even correctional guards, we even sat down with the AW and he said it's all wrong. This isn't the way that you do it. I got to look at it from a higher plane of thought and say, if your soul's not involved, then there's a problem. It's big business. If I'm a man walking around with chains and handcuffs and I'm chasing people down, to me, I look like that's the slave master chasing the slave in some sense, especially if you got dudes like Christopher Stone right here who's wrongfully convicted. And they told his mother and his father, they said, we're going to take down your whole family.
Yeah.
And they've been hunting him for years. So it's like, at what point does it stop? Like, I don't.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think we kind of just have to get rid of it. And I've spoken to a lot of people that still work at the department, people that have left the department that agree with me. Like, I'm not the only person saying this. Like, there are cops that agree with me that say it's just like so broken that you have to get rid of it.
And with those cops, how do you treat them? Because my treating of them is, I got to ask this question. How many documents have you fabricated?
I fabricated a lot of documents.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them that. And then did you send that paperwork through the chain of command? And did every single sergeant, lieutenant, all the way up to the captain with the seal of the Los Angeles County on there sign this off and say that it's correct paperwork, even though you knew it was wrong, they knew it was wrong, everybody else knew it was wrong, and you admit to saying yes? Then that means everybody is wrong.
Is guilty. Yes, yeah.
So all of y'all committing crimes. So you can't say that you stepped in here with clean hands, as the
Right.
court of law would say. So who the hell am I to trust?
Yeah.
And it's strange because that's our justice system.
Yeah. It's, completely corrupt. Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of, from what I understand through conversations with people, that's why a lot of action isn't taken over these deputy gangs and the crimes that they're committing. It's because it's so interwoven and it's so corrupt. Like, for example, what I've been told by deputy district attorneys is that it's difficult for us to go after the people that we're counting on to make our cases. If I have...
It's a numbers game.
Right. Like, if I'm trying to, make this case on someone who committed a murder, let's say, and the officer involved in the investigation is someone that we know is in a deputy gang, someone that we know has done wrong, that has done misconduct. To them, I don't agree with this. They won't go after that deputy because they want to put the suspected murderer away. Because to them, it's better to get more criminals off the street and to let the criminals with the badge go. It's better for them. I don't agree with that. I think maybe we would have less murder if we were going after the people that are sworn to serve and protect doing these crimes. Because, it does have an effect on people. I've talked to so many people that say, like, when you're growing up and you see, like, the people that are supposed to be, like, the example setters that are supposed to be enforcing the law and, doing right, committing crimes, lying on people, falsifying paperwork, locking people up, treating people like shit. Like, why would, like, it really, just like crashes your world. Why would you ever want to aspire to do the right thing if all you see is bad and they keep failing up? What's the point? What's the point of trying to do the right thing?
And then the history of it, I have a different viewing of where sheriffing and policing started. Can you give that? Because people, they tend to hear what a person says and they're like, oh my God, they're just bashing this and bashing that. But when you get down to the history of where it started,
Yeah.
and you get understanding, you're like, oh, that's what this was for.
Yeah.
So could you explain where it all originated?
Yeah. Well, here in Los Angeles County, the sheriff's department, when it started in the late 1870s, at the time it was, we had one sheriff and he would deputize different people to be his posse. It was a posse system. And he would usually deputize, his boys, like, frankly, or people that it would be advantageous to be friendly with, like business owners, actors, that type of thing. And a lot of what they did back then was just like enforcing systems of racism. Like in Los Angeles County at that time, we had a high number of people that were coming from Mexico, that lived in Mexico. The border kind of crossed them when Los Angeles was established as part of the United States. But, we had a lot of indigenous people, a lot of Mexicans. And a lot of what the sheriff's department did was to go after these people and strip them of their resources, of their land, of their homes, of their money, put them in jail, and make them do forced labor. A lot of indigenous people that were living here at the time, there are so many reports of them being given alcohol, and then the sheriffs would come and arrest them for being drunk and take them to the jail and literally rent them out to white landowners to do forced labor on their ranches and to like work off their debt
And hence
for public drunkenness.
the building of the prison industrial complex.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how it started. And I mean, that was like really the system, like for a very long time, that posse system where that was being enforced until I believe it was not until like the 1950s that they established an academy, and they were like, okay, we'll have uniforms and we'll actually like train people. Until then, it was just the sheriff and his boys like doing what they saw fit. A lot of people don't know that Los Angeles is the site of the biggest lynching in American history. It happened right in downtown LA. You can go, you know where the 110 freeway is at 6th Street?
Yeah.
It happened right there. And there were 19 Chinese people that were lynched, very similar to the Emmett Till story. Some white person said that a Chinese person looked at him wrong. And it led to this huge riot where Chinese people were literally dragged out of their homes and executed in the street. And the sheriff stood by, watched this all happen, did not do anything. All this went down. Yeah, I mean, like I said, they're not really for us, haven't really ever been. And I mean, the earliest policing systems in this country were runaway slave catchers. You know, white folks that were like, if you've seen the movie like Django, that were just like riding around looking for Black folks that had escaped enslavement. And they took it upon themselves to capture these people and to bring them back to these plantations. That was really like the first iteration of policing that we saw in this country. That was like the first time we really saw, you know, the law, which at that point was the Fugitive Slave Act, being enforced. And if you look at the badges that these slave catchers wore, they look exactly like the badges that we see on sheriffs today. I saw one at a museum. I think it was in Washington, D.C. It was a 5-pointed star. And I think I have a photo of this on my website. You put it next to the sheriff's badge that we have today. It's literally the same thing. The only difference is that the modern sheriff's badge has the addition of the California bear in the middle, and it says Los Angeles County on it.
Yeah, that's too many similarities, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. You know, I can see how people feel uncomfortable just hearing it. Some people, they want to ignore it. They won't even look at it or pay attention. And some people, I have family members that you can't tell them anything wrong about the law. You're like, why would they do that? You know, they're the law. What would make them want to do something like that? And it's like, any person has the capacity to do evil or do wrong. Any person. You just have to have the willpower not to. How many times have you moved since you
3
dropped the bomb on LA County?
3 times.
And what is the need for you to move?
Well, at first it was just I didn't live in an area where the sheriff's deputies patrolled, but I was noticing that there were sheriff's deputies parked outside of my house and just sitting there for hours, which is a tactic that I had heard of happening to people who have had family members killed by the sheriff's department. They told me, oh yeah, like they'll just come and sit outside of our house and like eat lunch and hang out, follow us around. So when I saw that, I kind of knew what was going on. It's, I believe, an intimidation tactic. Cops have told me, like, yes, that's an intimidation tactic. They're trying to scare you to make you stop. Yeah. So I had to move. When the series first published, I had to go into hiding, really, because I had someone contact me that told me they were concerned over practices they had seen at the highest levels of the department where information was being misused to look up like political enemies of the department and find out personal information. These are the police, so they can put in your name and they'll find out, you know, your car, where you live, all of that stuff. Basically, this person was saying that they were afraid that that would happen to me and that bad things would happen because they had seen it happen already before to people that were perceived as enemies of the department. So when they told me that, they were like, you should leave Los Angeles when the story comes out, because I don't think it's going to go well for you if you are at your home.
Why? Why still continue?
Well, I mean, I do enjoy my work. I really like doing stories that touch on things that, maybe like we know growing up in community, but the wider world doesn't know about. With this story, it wasn't necessarily like new information to me. Because as I said, I had heard about it since I was a kid, but there really wasn't any large accounting of it. There wasn't like, an in-depth article like, here's the story, here's where it came from, this is why they do it, here's who these people are and how you can find them. And doing that and just knowing the impact that it had in my community is like, it's the best reward ever. I don't think I could like find a high like that if I tried. Just making that difference to people and like giving that resource to people has been really great for me personally. I don't think that, I don't know, people will like gas me up and like say like, oh, like you've made such a difference. It's hard for me to like say yes to that because I still see that the deputy gangs are very active, that they're still, actively going after people, that people are still suffering in Men's Central Jail. People are still wrongfully convicted, in prison. And we still have deputy gang members running the department. So it's hard for me to say that like any of this really made that much of a difference. But like the small victories I think are equally important. Like knowing that the public defenders are using my deputy gang database and checking the names when they get a new client, that they're running the arresting officers.
You got it hooked up where you can look them up?
Yes. LASDgangs.com. You can look up deputy gang members. But yeah, the public defender's office, they use my database. And anytime someone is arrested by a deputy, they check to see if they have a deputy gang background. And that I think is huge. Like that's like where a lot of this can stop. Like so many people are wrongfully arrested every day.
Didn't even know it was such a thing.
Yeah. And if you have your public defender just like taking that first step and saying, okay, like, oh, it's a deputy gang member, that's a Brady violation. Like, so now this whole case is in question. Like that can save someone's life.
Is that retroactive? Can it be used in cases that have been convicted?
Yeah, I mean,
already?
yeah, definitely. Because people have you. I've helped people that are incarcerated that I've found information on, and I've sent them this information and, tried to help them get like some kind of like habeas corpus relief or anything. Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. Like if you find out that, the guy arrested you has this like long history of like being dishonest and participating in a criminal gang, like, oh yeah, certainly. I think that's evidence that could make a difference in your case. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what is next for you?
So I'm working on a book about all of this.
Is it hard?
Writing a book?
I cannot sit down
Yes.
and type for the life of me.
Yeah, it's really hard. I have to be very disciplined with it. Yeah, I'm writing a book. I continue to report on deputy gangs ongoing. It's unfortunately a story that isn't really going anywhere, but
get a little on the book. What's the book about?
The book it's about one, the history of deputy gangs and everything I've covered, as well as my experience reporting on this and just the different things that I've gone through as a result of my reporting, like having to move, having to go into hiding, having to, make a lot of changes to the way I live my life. Like they monitor my social media. I found out that I was being monitored in 2022.
How do you find out you're being monitored?
Public records request. I asked for any record of sheriff's deputies talking about me in a public records request. They denied my request. I had to sue them for it, but I did win. I have never lost a lawsuit against LA County.
Them?
Oh yeah. I have probably at any given time, probably like 5 to 10 active lawsuits against the county for information. And I always win.
Hold on. So how did you get wind before finding before filing the information, getting the information? How did
I know?
Yeah, how did you know?
A cop told me, I think I saw a picture from your Instagram printed out at my station. And that really weirded them out. They were like, I have never seen really anything like that before. It looked like your Instagram. You might want to look into if they're, watching you, because it seems like they are. And yeah, like hearing something like a printout of my Instagram, like that's really
stalkerish.
It's weird, creepy vibes. So when I heard that, I was like, yeah, I do need to look into that. And when they denied the request, it was just kind of like
blatant
confirmation, like something is happening here. So then we sued, and it took 3 years, but I did get the information, and it was over like 600 pages just on me.
Just pictures, 600 pages of pictures of them just looking at you?
Pictures, just like monitoring what I was doing online. I have a crime analyst that's assigned to monitor anything that I post online. Her name is Kimberly Dunn. She's probably going to watch this. And yeah, she makes reports about what I post, and she sends it out to a listserv of different deputies. Yeah, which has changed like how I live my life. I'm a millennial. Like at one point I really did love to post on Instagram and, share things with my friends. It's how people keep up with me. I can't do that anymore.
So you basically have to protect everybody else around you. So
yes.
You don't post?
I do post, but I no longer post my friends. If I do, I'm not like tagging them or anything.
Do you go out with your friends?
I do go out with my friends, but I always tell people like, don't take any pictures like of me. Don't put me on your Instagram. If you do, like put it on your close friends. Like, cause I just like, I don't know how deep it goes. I don't know like how they find these people. I do know that some of my friends have been looked at. I do know that some of my friends have been surveilled as a result of just being my friend.
Well, I'm finna be surveilled, obviously, now. Yeah. Not that I didn't think they was doing it already, but it comes with the territory. Like I honestly think some people are called to be like revolutionary in a sense. Some people, they got to be given a voice, and being the person that you would least expect. You got a different type of armor on.
Yeah.
They don't expect you to be this person. So there's so many dudes right now sitting in jail that don't have the balls to do what you did. So many dudes walking the streets right now that don't have the guts to do that, and they will never do it because of what they fear what the next man is going to do. And you got to be fearless.
Yeah.
So if I had the access to do it and all that, everything that you posted, I'm talking about the maps, the different slogans, I done made reels out of them and reposted it. So
thank you.
I was doing that a long time ago, and it's something that I take serious because, my dad was a cold case murderer, and I have going to my auntie's house and over 20 some years later, see her break down because she was like, it's weird because the sheriffs went and got your dad and called him to us one day, and they knew exactly where to find him, where he was at. They knew which apartments he was always at. And, it was just weird things that happened. And to have my own family, who you are, that work in the sheriff's department at Compton, and they can't say anything about it, and nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Yeah.
People just don't vanish and up and disappear. I don't care what they say. And it's strange things that happen. I got some of my homeboys that have been killed by the sheriffs, and then they tell their girlfriends, we're going to get you next. It's
yeah.
The paperwork is just, I'll never get it. And it's so traumatizing to the point that whereas if my child came to me and told me they would want to be an officer, we're not going to have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to be anything else you want to do, but this what you're not going to do.
Yeah.
Because I know what comes with that. Once you join that, there is no more family with us. Because you took an oath, and under that oath, you're going to ride with them. And if they say, hey, you going to put your brother away, or you want to be the guy that got his meat burnt off somewhere?
Right.
If they easily influence, they'll do it. So it's it's a different understanding. But truly, truly thank you for what you're doing. Even if you don't think you're doing something, you're doing something, you're making waves.
Thank you.
if anything, it'll light some fire under some people's asses to do something, to inspire them to do something. Where can people find you? Instagram,
Yeah.
websites, where can they?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok. All of them, you can just find me by my name, Cerise Castle.
I got a question before we go. What do you see for the future? What do you see for the youth?
I feel like my answer to that is like mad depressing.
I mean, it's the truth. The truth may hurt.
Yeah, I mean, honestly.
I'll say this. What do you see and what do you want?
I like that. What do I see? I mean, I'm very like scared for the future. Just like as a reporter, just like seeing what I see every day, I'm very scared. Like this is like nothing to do with the conversation, but seeing so many people, like our government, just like continue to fund this genocide in Palestine, despite the fact that people are so vocally opposed to it, scares me. I feel like we're living in like a neo-feudalist society, like with stagnant wages where people can't be upwardly mobile, that we're stuck in this, system where we're like forced to work for nothing. Everything is unattainable. It scares me. I go to the neighborhoods that I report on and just like the conditions that people are forced to live in. Like a lot of people don't know that like Watts, Compton, Willowbrook has some of the highest levels of lead in the water.
Yeah, we've seen it's turned black now. It's so bad the water's black.
Yeah, and this is also the neighborhoods with the highest number of youth in Los Angeles County. These are also the neighborhoods that have some of the worst schools in the United States. Like, it scares me. Like, where the youth like are being forced to grow up in these like squalid conditions, and they aren't given the tools to get out of it. And, even if they did, like, there's not really a path. Like, they don't have a way to, build a life for themselves in this like capitalist society that we live in. And they don't have a voice when it comes to government, like at the highest levels. To be clear, I do think that like voting at the local level, like that is where you can make a difference. But when we're talking about like big picture stuff, like, no, I don't think people really effectively have a voice anymore when it comes to like the federal government, when it comes to how Congress works. And all of that stuff really scares me. Like, I don't know where we're going. I said neo-feudalism earlier. Like, that's like, yeah, I think it's like plutocracy vibes, neo-feudalist vibes. That's where I think we're going. I don't want to go there at all. What I'd like to see is just like big change, like sweeping change. Like, I think the system that we live in is like broken and it needs to be remade.
Three biggest things.
Three biggest things that I'd like to see changed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now, I think we need an immediate ceasefire in Palestine. I think that we need to see a death of we need to get rid of the Electoral College. I think that, and like, this is like really broad, but just like accountability, like for government, for private companies, like it's unfathomable to me that we can live in the United States and I see people like living the way we do, that we have 60,000 homeless people on the streets in this city. This is the city with the most billionaires like in the world. How is that possible? It doesn't make sense to me. How are we living in a city with the most billionaires and people don't have clean water? It doesn't make sense to me.
The only city where you can drive past a homeless man in a Bentley. How does it not faze you to be able to see that? Like,
yeah, it doesn't make sense. So like, there needs to be some kind of accountability for that. There needs to be some change. Is it a wealth tax? Is it universal basic income? Is it reparations? These are all things that, I've reported on, that people are looking into. There just needs to be some sort of like sweeping accountability, because we can't continue like this.
You heard the truth. She dropped the bomb, and I could see that all that is like, it weighs on you. It's like that hit. She was like, maybe you needed to get that out. That's an expression that maybe a lot of people feel the same way about. They've never heard it. Like, all right, somebody I can finally agree on. So I'm not going through some things. These are agreeable subjects. Thank you for coming out
Thank you for having me.
The next time you drop the bomb, I matter of fact, I want to be a cameraman. You know what I'm saying? I'll be cameraman, security, pull up, hop out there. All right, where are we at? Let's get it done. And for the different groups out there, any groups that you would like to highlight, like the people that follow the sheriffs, like what is the name of that?
Yeah,
group?
definitely. There are a lot of great people doing a lot of great work throughout Los Angeles County. I would say if you're interested, just like overall in sheriff accountability, there's a coalition called the Check the Sheriff Coalition that is made up of several different groups. I can't name them all. The ones that come to mind, Black Lives Matter, Council of the Contract, Antelope Valley, all involved in different facets of police accountability. They're in the Check the Sheriff Coalition, and they specifically work on accountability with the Sheriff's Department. Dignity and Power Now and the Justice LA Coalition, they're working on, well, I mean, they've been supposed to close Men's Central Jail, but they're working on accountability on making that happen. The ACLU, if you're interested in learning more about public records requests and how to get information from government bodies. And I mean, if you're interested in just journalism and doing this yourself, I would recommend the Ida B. Wells Society. That's how I sort of got into public records. I took a class with them for free. It's free.
And one of you lucky people, if you can get a hold of her, ask her to be her understudy.
Yeah,
Journalist apprenticeship.
always looking for help. Hopefully like you're in school or something, because I don't have money to pay. And I'm just morally, I do not believe in free labor. So please be in school or something. We could work out a class credit, something. But yeah, I'm always looking for help.
All right. Well, to conclude this, thank you. This is the Strangest Fruit Podcast. This is Miss Cerise Castle, the journalist. Next time you come up on something good, please drop by, drop some stuff on us. Thank you everybody for watching. Stay tuned. We got some new things coming next.